Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Kristie Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC.
Hey, Maggie.
Hi, Kristie.
How are you?
Well, yeah.
It's been a week for you.
It's been a week. We just got back into school today. We had delayed start, but they're back in school after what was a
extended holiday break.
3 weeks. So yeah. And I also think it would be important to right now what's happening in California and we can kind of like, this can just be kind of like a little special episode that we do, recognizing that a lot of people are hurting and there's going to probably be a pretty high need for mental health resources after this. And probably our play therapists that are in California are probably going to need some supports in getting themselves okay and getting their practices up. So just kind of wanting to recognize that.
Quick plug. I was going to pull her information up. As we've shared, I live in North Carolina, and we were really devastated by Hurricane Helene for my neighbors to the west of me. And we've been doing a lot of work to try to get clinicians back up and running. Sometimes we don't think of the like small little pieces to natural disasters like wildfires or hurricanes. My guess is, the needs are going to be similar, but we got a lot of help from Katie Acola, who lives in Washington State. She did a lot for the Hawaii fires, and my guess is that she'll do work also for the LA area fires, the Pacific Palisades. But there's multiple fires happening right now in California because of the high winds and things are traveling. But she does kind of crisis response. So she helps people who have been impacted or mental health clinicians in the area get crisis supplies out for kids and families. And so I just want to make sure we plug her and her work, because if people want to do something, this is an easy way. It has made a big difference in our community, or our community to the west, where schools, mental health professionals, families could get immediate supplies for kids to start processing, even if they couldn't get back into play therapy offices. And then also, if anyone is ever interested, we are helping to rebuild the play therapy community out in Western North Carolina and doing some supply generating for them, because we forget how expensive our playrooms are. And when your homes have been destroyed or severely impacted, and so has your office, where it's been sitting under, 18 feet of water that is full of all sorts of things that no toy should ever sit in. We're trying to get them back on their feet to really be able to support families. We know after a natural disaster, it takes about a year for a community to even come out of the fog of the natural disaster. And so our community is going to have needs for a while. The same with the Pacific Palisades, same with the Hawaii wildfires. But please look out. I know Katie is really active on Facebook, but she does help get agencies back on their feet and the community, the supplies that they need to do the initial processing. So as we talk about like the wildfires and stuff like that, I really encourage you to look her up if you want to help in some way.
Yeah.
California APT will also probably do something, but please know it's overwhelming initially to respond to all of those requests. And the need is not immediate for most people. It's down the road. And so I know here in North Carolina, we had a lot of people initially wanting to come in when our community couldn't even house people. Like so many people were displaced. Not only were homes destroyed, but hotels, basic needs were gone. And so they're going to have needs coming up. Katie's a good start. And then also reach out to California APT to see how they're planning, if they have a plan to help, or if they know agencies that are helping. And again, Red Cross is always a great option. It's a vetted organization to help support people recovering from any type of natural disaster that's happening.
I think that's something I always talk to my mom about, because she's always going to want to do something right away. And I was like, wait 3 months, because in 3 months, like set a reminder on your phone so you don't forget. But in 3 months, the donations dry up. The news has picked up something else. People are still struggling. And I think like this was not what we were intending to talk about, but it's also important to have self-care for the people who are the healthcare providers to the helpers that are in those spaces, like you're also struggling, and it's okay that you're struggling. And that doesn't mean that you can't help other people, but you also need to have space for yourself to grieve and to process your experience.
Yeah.
I think we forget that sometimes.
And sometimes it's not even 3 months down the road, it's 6 months. It's a nice time to reach out, but just remember as people are recovering after these devastating experiences, right? Like we go through shock, we go through all different things, we go through being overwhelmed and exhaustion.
Mhm.
And as much as we want to help and do something, they may not be ready to receive help. And
Right.
there's nothing on you, right? Like it's not a personal anything. It's just where are they holistically? I know living in North Carolina, and it really is our neighbor. The places that were really hit are less than 2 hours from my house. We've been up there a million times for touristy reasons, or there's a lot of like activity that you can do in Western North Carolina. And so there's a strong connection. I have students who are up there, or graduates of our program who are up there, right? So just like checking in on people, letting them know you're thinking of them is really helpful. And I think what Maggie said, like pay attention to you, because there's a component of you that are really impacted
Yeah.
by these experiences too. And I think that's true of some of our kids and clients. Well, and then the other thing is think outside of the box. Maybe it's you can't, as play therapists, we can't provide, like they're not needing something materialistic, but maybe they're needing support in other ways. Uh,
Hmm.
could we support a therapist who is supporting someone who has relocated to the area? Or are there supervision opportunities that we can provide here? I know that's some of the stuff that we're working on in North Carolina about building our play therapy base up there. And I'm sure California is going to be the same way. California is huge. The wildfires are impacting a very large area of California. So there's lots of people impacted. We're seeing one component, right? The Pacific Palisades is what has been on the news the most, but there's many areas in California that are on fire right now, that houses are being burned and other stuff. And so, just how can you help in other ways? Is there a way that you can make a donation here, or could you send supplies, or it's just going to look different, or just even well wishes, like sending a card to an agency out in California that is supporting people, like we appreciate what you're doing. One of the therapists I talked to was supporting some of the relocated families, got a card from someone in another state with snacks.
Right.
Right. And it's like something so minor, but it like meant a lot to this person. And so just thinking about how to support. I know we put up some stuff, or the North Carolina Association for Play Therapy put some stuff up about how can you support people after a natural disaster. So if people are looking for ways, please visit their site. It's a wonderful resource that's out there. And there's other resources too. I just know that that's one you can go to.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it's going to be a long-term
Mhm.
thing, and it's a long-term impact. And I think sometimes I saw this happen after COVID, which is a different kind of situation, but this expectation that everyone just go back to normal and kids go back to school and kids do this, and people were very confused as to why their children were acting out. And it's like, okay, well, one day, according to kids, the world was safe,
Yeah.
and the next day the world was not safe. And
Or
then all of a sudden,
under
yeah,
certain conditions, like you have to wear a mask and you have to be so many feet apart.
and then all of a sudden we go back to school and everything's fine. And it
Yeah.
was really hard for kids to understand. And I think we just expected them to, I think somehow there was like this expectation that adults were okay. Like, okay, now it's safe to go back and we've had vaccines. And so we're totally fine. And we're kind of conditioned as adults to just be like, oh, okay. And we have that information. And so we're kind of doing it, but we don't sit down and have those conversations with kids. And so that was some,
Adult. Check on your parents too of your
yeah,
clients. You're not okay.
not okay.
Yeah.
I was not okay during that. And that's not the, I'm not trying to say it's the same in any way, but it's confusing. Right. And like, I remember having a conversation with someone who obviously during COVID, but like got sick then with COVID. And it's like, but I wore the mask that I was supposed to be safe. And this dissonance between what we're telling people is like creating safety, or what the messages that we're sending kids, and then their reality and how they're interpreting them can be very different. And so just realizing that this is going to be impacting kids and their caregivers and their play therapists, their teachers, their admin, everyone's going to be impacted, and that impact is going to present itself very differently for each person, and then it's going to be a long term kind of thing. It's not just like, oh well, we dried out the school, or we did, we built portables, so we're going to be okay. So just
Well, and
it's
I think what you said, Maggie, really like sits on my heart a little bit. This idea that we just jump back into normal.
mhm,
Don't even give like chances for healing or like discussion around it for kids, but adults as well, right? Like we're supposed to go function. And then if for some reason we're not functioning where we were prior or before the incident, then how do we internalize that? Right?
mhm,
Like, and kids are doing that too, right? Like I'm thinking of this from an adult perspective, but I see kids doing this as well. So then they internalize the message, right? Well, something must be wrong with me, that I
mhm.
just can't get over this. Like, what do you need? Like all those components. And so,
And there's going to be survival
really,
skills, I bet. And
and we don't know what their previous experience is either, you
mhm,
know, based on these just events that happen in our country around the globe. The other thing I was thinking is just remember there's some developmental years that kids perseverate on these things that they're hearing about, right? Where they really will worry more, be more anxious. Like that can be part of a developmental process,
mhm.
but it's important for us to assess and still help them cope and not overlook those things or like overreact to them, and help parents understand and those components too. But we need to touch that with like really kid gloves, and really thorough A, understanding of development, and B, of this child's unique characteristics that they're bringing in at those moments.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Yeah, it's just a tough situation, and everyone's going to be impacted, and it's going to be a long-term thing. And so just letting the play therapy community know and California know that we're thinking of them and we're working towards identifying resources and here to support. But I just felt like it was important to mention. I We
Absolutely.
didn't talk about it before we started recording it. It was just something
Planning.
that came up.
We could probably do a whole episode on like supporting after, a major
Mhm.
event.
Yeah, maybe we can have that. I forgot her name already. I apologize, but
Diacola.
mhm.
Yeah. I know she was a good guide for us here in North Carolina of just how to respond in the moment and what the initial need was. And then even just problem solving what some like bigger needs were going to be down the road, because she's helped in other ways with previous natural disasters. She was a really good resource. So if someone from California is listening to this and looking for resources, Katie might be a great person to reach out for. I haven't even told her that I am mentioning her name here, so I'll also send her a text because she might get overwhelmed really quickly.
With our large listenership.
Well, just as
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
hear other stuff, but there are organizations out there that are supporting.
And I think there's also an opportunity too. You mentioned the Red Cross, and that was something that you can also train with the Red Cross and they need mental health resources. And that is something that as social workers and OPCs and psychologists that we're qualified to do if you're so called, and you may be called in. I think it's kind of like the national reserves in a way, that when something happens, they kind of call you in, not necessarily at the time, but perhaps even like later on to help provide those services and the psychological first aid and making sure everyone's okay. And I think if I'm not mistaken, that's something that Dr. Bratton and Dr. Landreth did too after 9/11. And Katrina. Yeah. It's definitely something, if that's something that you're interested in, that the Red Cross would be able to help with that too. So
Yeah, I know there's other organizations too.
yeah,
Just check with the area that you're in, but it's a great starting place because if they know you have that and you have training, they're more apt to kind of pull you in at these other times. And you have to have the capacity to do it because it's not a like one day event. You tend to go for several days. I know the first responders here went for like a week at a time and they rotated in and out. And so it's okay if you don't have the capacity. It's also
yeah.
just great training for you to have. Like I find it really helpful training.
And I think it's helpful too as play therapists. I think this bleeds in. Oh wait, what?
Oh, can you hear my dog going nuts in the
Oh,
back?
no, I didn't know.
Good.
But I think it's something to remember as play therapists. Like, there's going to be times where it's just not in our capacity, or as therapists, whether it be because where you are in your life right now, or if a client is too close to home. And I talk with my students about this a lot. When I was practicing in Mississippi, someone had lost a child, a 7 month old, to SIDS. And Molly was 6 months old at the time. And I was like, I can't. Like, it's just not, like, it's not because I don't want to, or I don't have the training to do it, but emotionally, I don't have the capacity to do this. And I'd be doing someone a disservice. It's not okay. It's perfectly fine to recognize where your limits lie and the capacity to do that, and providing other resources. I think, a lot of times we talk about, at least for me, in ethics of like when you refer and when you don't refer, and what that looks like. And I really try and stay pretty firm on, like, it's about, diagnosis if you're not capable of providing services for a specific need or diagnoses. But also, if I don't have the emotional capacity to sit with someone who's lost their child, which I didn't, that's okay. And it's not because you don't like this person, or you don't believe this person, or you don't want to go and help people in California. It's just where you are emotionally, and if you have the capacity to do that. Because I think that's where we get into trouble sometimes, is when we take on things that we're not ready, or we just don't have the emotional space for. And that's okay. It's okay to take care of yourself, right? And I think we talk about that a lot. Like, you have to put your own oxygen mask on before you put it on others, because we don't want to burn out either, because then we're not helping anybody. So,
Well, there's so many ways to help that is not direct facing too.
mhm.
Like one of the things that I've learned after this natural disaster is not only is it people's emotional health, but it's just their like day-to-day living abilities that sometimes need support. So, like shopping at places that have been impacted that may still have product but don't have the storefront anymore where you can purchase things, like online or doing little things like that. Or maybe there's some local churches that want to be able to provide food, or the World Kitchen helped here.
Oh, the World
And
Kitchen.
so, like, just being able to, donate to the World Kitchen, or like food trucks that are going up in the areas to support first responders,
Mhm.
like that can sometimes make a world of a difference. And so, yes, we want to be able, lots of us, our hearts are giving hearts, right?
Mhm.
Like we're in this career for a reason. We're not here to, well, most of us aren't here to make millions of dollars. Like it's great if that's a byproduct, right? But it's not the
I'm not
expectation.
going to turn it down, but
Right.
it's because we care.
It's because we care. We do this because we're compassionate individuals. And so when these events happen, our compassion sometimes can get overloaded. So just know
Yeah.
where you are.
We had this conversation. I know this is like kind of a, a segue, but you mentioned compassion, and we talked about compassion fatigue. And I had a faculty member talk about empathy fatigue, right? It's like, if we are so empathic that we're taking on the emotions of others, like, where do you draw the line, and how do you have those boundaries between yourself and those that you're serving? I just thought that was an interesting, I hadn't heard, you always hear of compassion fatigue. And so hearing empathy fatigue, and I know you and I both work with kids who have experienced trauma, and
Yes.
that can be really hard in
Mhm.
how to kind of delineate. But I think
What types of things do you do for self-care?
I think that's a great question. And I think that's something maybe we can take up in our next episode, because I think that's something that, especially play therapists, as we talk about natural disasters and trauma and what's going on in California, what happened in North Carolina, and it seems like these sort of natural disasters and school shootings and all of these things, kids are impacted by all sorts of things. And so as the helpers, we have a lot of stuff that we're taking on. And so I think it's important for us to explore those things. And so for those of you that are in California, thinking about what you can do to protect yourself so that you can help others, and help yourself. And then also for those of us who are just empathic and compassionate, figuring out how all of this works and how we continue to show up for others, but also show up for ourselves. And so maybe that's something we can talk about in our next episode.
So,
Well, thanks. This was
thanks.
awesome.
I know. I'm sorry. This was quick and dirty. If you guys have questions about any of this stuff, let us know. We're happy to expand. We'll do a Q&A at some point of questions that we get from our audience.
Yes. And we have some really good speakers coming in specifically for the wildfires and disaster responses and supporting play therapists. We're going to have Katie Acola on. We're also going to try and get some other speakers within the play therapy space. So if you know anyone or have any topics that you want to hear about, please let us know.
If you want to send us an email,
yes,
to playful beginnings podcast, all one word, at gmail.com.
Yep. And you can also, if you leave a review or like this, you can leave a question and we will try and get to them.
We'll kind of tally them for a while.
Yeah.
Unless they're directed in a podcast that we're covering, or if there's a question that will lead to a whole podcast, we'll accumulate them and then we'll have like a Q&A times that we can get to your questions.
All right. Well, thanks, Kristie.
Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah.
Bye, y'all. Bye. See you on the next episode.